Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we talked to Benjamin Hardy about the fact that being a developer is more than coding. Benjamin works as the crash reporting and real user monitoring team lead at Raygun in New Zealand. Ben is a web developer with a passion for user-focused design and helping others achieve success, which is very much in line with the podcast, which is fantastic. So welcome to The Cynical Developer, Ben.
Thank you, James. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on, all the way from New Zealand. The time zones are a little bit challenging, shall we say, but we've managed to pin down some time, so that's all good.
Yeah, we managed to find the time when it's one person's evening and the other person's early morning. So,
Yep. And I'll apologise to yourself and to any listeners that if you hear any shouting and screaming in the background, that's unfortunately my two kids. Normally, when we record around 8:30 in the evening, and they're fast asleep by this point. But at the moment, they're downstairs watching YouTube. So hopefully they'll keep quiet.
yeah, and likewise go for me. But instead of being at home, I'm at work, and so any shouting or screaming are my other developers on the floor.
Sure. So we're here today, as the intro said, to talk about the fact that being a developer is more than just coding, and that to ever progress as a developer, you've got to understand a little bit more than just slinging code. But it's something I think that most developers don't realize, at least when they first start out, that they're going to need a lot of other skill sets as well as just being able to code.
Yeah, it definitely is one of the unrecognized talents, I suppose. When you initially go into your development journey, you think you need to know all of the latest frameworks or technologies, languages, and then the more and more you progress, the more you realize a lot of the soft skills can actually have a greater impact and around your career. Being able to think from different perspectives and think about the outcomes and the value you're providing has more of a play in your career than necessarily what frameworks or technologies you know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that tend to poke fun at some podcasts and blog posts about soft skills because it's become one of those cliche terms now. A bit like Web 2.0 and microservices and all that sort of thing. But as you say, it's a very, very important skill to have. And in general, and this is a generalization, that a lot of developers are very introverted people. They don't like to talk to other people. They don't like to be outside of their comfort zone and do more than they're asked. They like to sort of just get down, hunker over their keyboard and tap away for 8 or 7 hours a day, however long you are tied to your desk.
Yeah, and I can respect that point of view because I know my background definitely came from being the more introverted person who disliked the idea of going up and talking in front of a crowd or talking even on a podcast. Just racked up the nerves to the point where I just would not bother, which is why being a developer looks so appealing because you can go away and build something, make it your own, so to speak, and develop some value. But a lot of these soft skills or being able to think about the customer and think about business outcomes, being able to have those conversations is where you can start to progress your career because you are then communicating with other people and you're showing them that you understand them and their perspective and how you can help them achieve what they're looking to achieve.
Sure. So there's 2 points that you made there that I just want to sort of pick up on. Is that you said that you used to be quite the introverted, stereotypical developer type, and you also mentioned the fact of career progression. Was overcoming that introvertedness a necessary requirement for you to be able to progress in your career?
I think I had a more funny path of overcoming some of my more introverted nature. So back in like college, I just remember that we had a particular assignment where you could easily get credits if you just do a presentation in front of the class. And I just always remember not doing that presentation and not getting those credits because the idea of getting up and talking was just a new kind of nightmare to me, which is fair enough. But after doing a little stint teaching and then forcing myself to sort of go up there, doing some relief work, doing some teaching web development, became just more comfortable with the idea of getting up and speaking and being more comfortable having those sorts of conversations in front of people and sharing my thoughts and the skills required to be a front-end developer and be a web developer and program itself. And so I found a lot of those skills of being able to actually present ideas, share feedback, think in different perspectives and communicate have been really tangible to being a better developer in the seniority, I would say, because then you can better mentor, you can better teach, and you can better share knowledge during regular knowledge sharing sessions, during the presentations when you are showing a client or you're showing your business. Here are my designs, here is my actual plan around what we're going to be working on, and people can then start to come on that journey with you. They can start to appreciate and get that knowledge themselves.
Yeah, and I've gone through a similar journey. When I was younger, I was bitterly shy, and to a degree, I still am in certain situations. And I ended up having to go and I worked in retail for about 7 or 8 years part time while I was in university and in college and all that, and that brought out that more confident side of me, because you have to go up and you had to talk to the customers in the shops or the stores. Otherwise, you weren't going to make the sales. You weren't going to be able to get them to have a store card or anything like that. So that forced that side of me to adapt and change. And you touched on there about if you can't be that confident person around technology and what you're doing, is that it becomes very hard to take that management role. I think you can't mentor people. You can't get a team together and rally them up and go, come on, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it, and really put your thoughts forward on that. Being a wallflower, I think you could probably become a 9-to-5 coder, and there's nothing wrong with 9-to-5 coders if that's the path you want to choose. But you wouldn't ever, I don't think, become anything more than that. You would maybe you progress to senior, but you'd still be just sat there coding. And I think if you are very insular and just doing your bit of coding as a senior, that you're not really a senior. You're just getting paid more for slinging your code, and you're not helping the team there.
Yeah, and I think one additional point to add there is it really helps with some of those more difficult conversations you have to have sometimes with either your reports or with other people when you have some of those not nice conversations. Having practiced just even sharing information or communicating is a great introductory. It's a great skill to fall back on because it helps introduce you and makes you more comfortable sharing those ideas. And conversations around it.
Those difficult conversations are very hard to have, and I think if you are not confident enough to just talk to a person, you're definitely not going to be able to have those horrible conversations about work output or attendance or attention to detail or many other different topics that come up. So you need to something you really need to work on.
Yeah, and that's not to diminish any value of those who just don't want to go down that more managerial path. If you do want to go down and be more of the, I think what's classified as a 10x developer, where you do just sling code and just have immense output, then that's fine as long as you find the right team to also support you in the other avenues. But a lot of the time, the traditional career path is once you reach a certain stage, as you progress up the junior, intermediate, senior, team lead, or a manager, it is falling outside of the domain you're traditionally trained in, and it falls more into these. Now you need to look at running meetings, or think about business value, or think about what impact this will have in the customer. And so that's really where you can start to need to sort of retrain in, or start to looking at training yourself in additional side fields.
Yeah, I think one of the points that you brought up earlier was that you should understand the customer, and I think that's a very good point. Is that people fail to actually realize what a customer is. So I don't know if you could maybe explain to the listeners or give a brief overview of what a customer is.
Yeah. So as I said, you have two different types of customers when it comes to what you're developing and what you're working for. So you have what's classified as an internal customer, and I'll go into that in a second. And you have what's also classified as your external customer. So what I would mean by an internal customer is that's anybody in your team or organization who you are actively developing or working for. So it's quite common when you work in a product team like I do at Raygun to have internal tools or systems which you build for other members of the organization. Things like an admin website or other tools or facilities they need to use in order to keep the day-to-day facilities going. And so these internal customers are anybody who traditionally are not getting paid, or they are getting paid, but they're not paying to receive a good, but instead are also being paid and are also part of your wider organizational team. Now, these external customers, on the other hand, you can think of them as they're just people who are coming to your organization, coming to your business for a particular service. So these are your more traditional clients. If you are an online retailer, for example, then your external customers are any people who are actually coming and purchasing your goods. Likewise, if you have like an online SaaS tool, or you are a business who sells their development services so that other people can have a website, your external customers is anyone outside of your organization.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think the external customers, are the people that most developers recognize as being the customer. But the internal customers are the ones that I think get overlooked and don't get recognized by a lot of developers as being a customer as well. And you need to go through that same engagement process with those internal customers as you do with externals as well. I've worked for many clients in many different industries, and sort of a good example that I can give for an internal customer was the finance department for a client that I built a lot of internal applications just to make their day-to-day jobs so much easier, because there were some really quick wins in there that sorted out their situation. They were reissuing invoices and things like that quite a lot. And it was a manual process and could take up to sort of 45 minutes for them to find the correct invoice and send them over to the customer. But they hadn't looked at any solutions to provide that information directly to the customer. And we quickly built a system where the finance department could access all the invoices they needed to very, very quickly without diving into the very complex accounting software that they used.
Yeah,
and it's probably a little bit easier as a contractor to treat those internal customers as external customers because they are external to my business. But that's even if I was a permanent employee doing the same project, they would still be an internal customer.
Yeah, I think those internal customers often get looked at as, I don't want to say second-class citizens, but the sort of quote that I remember, or the saying, is you never go to a builder's house because their house is going to just be a complete building site, because they'll never get round to looking at or reviewing or finishing whatever jobs they have on their own place. But they'll always go to someone else's house and that'll look immaculate.
Yep. Yeah, definitely can attest to that. My parents have a couple of holiday houses that they rent out, and you go to those houses and they are pristine. You go to my parents' house and it's not pristine because they spend so much time cleaning and organizing of the other houses. It's the last thing they want to do when they get home, and it's the same as the builder analogy you used there. Yeah. After doing manual labor all day, the last thing they want to do is come home and do it on the days off as well, which it kind of makes us developers a little bit of a weird breed, where we spend all day writing code and then we come home and to chill out a little bit, we write some more code, and then when we got a spare hour or two, we sit down, we think, oh, what can we do with this time? Oh, let's go and write some code.
Yeah, exactly. And even sometimes I know of a couple of developers, myself included, who always mean to get around to working on my own personal website, and then when it comes to actually doing it, I just find like I've been doing this all day, or I've been looking at other things that I want to look at right now. I'll just get to it later, and then you end up shipping that, adding it to the backlog of things to do.
Yeah, I've got a side project at the moment that I've got people asking for, and on my whiteboard behind me, I have a list of tasks I need to do to organise an MVP to get that out. But I've been that run down from all the high pressure work that I'm doing at the moment, that I get to the end of the day that I'm paid for by my clients, and I look at that list and go, I'll do that tomorrow. And you never get around to doing it. So it's been sat there for 2 months now.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. So just sort of going back to the customers there, and quite a nice segue. It's taken me 2 months to not do any of that list, and I'm essentially ignoring my customers and their needs. I don't know if you can talk about how people should not ignore their customers and what their customers actually want.
Yeah, so you shouldn't ignore your customers, and you should take into consideration their needs and desires. And at the very least, you can engage with them, or you could flick them a message, which I am kind of assuming you do or have done. Let them know like your feedback is important. And a couple reasons. The first reason that immediately comes to mind is it increases their like customer engagement. If you're at least communicating with them, thank you for sharing your feedback, you're not ignoring them, then they can start to have that appreciation and that feeling that they're being heard, that you understand their desires, and it informs them and shows that you actually care and that you do want to resolve their issues. Because at the end of the day, nobody likes to raise issues and feel like they're being ignored or their pain points are not being actioned. Yeah,
it's with that product, because it's not actually out yet. What I tend to do is the people that are really interested in it, I talk to on a one-to-one basis, and I can show them what progress has been made, and go, look, this is what we're doing. This is what I'm thinking about doing next. What do you think about that? And my plan is to try and get them into some sort of focus group and get them all together and go, look, right, this is where we are. What do you think? So when it actually comes out, that the product meets their needs, because there are already existing products out there that do what I'm doing, but they just do it very badly. So what I'm trying to do is build something that they want that works for them. But you mentioned there about their feedback, the customer's feedback, and not to ignore that. I've definitely worked for clients, and I've worked as a permanent developer at companies where they get feedback from their customers and they ignore it, and all they do is go, new feature, new feature, new feature. And they don't actually tweak or fix existing features so that they actually work for their customer. They just look at them and go, "Nah, does the job." But they're looking at it from the wrong point of view. It may technically do what they need to do, but the customer's struggling with it.
Yeah, and I think that they have that bias involved where they think their solution is actually fine. It works for them. There's no problem here. But when your customers are repeatedly hitting this roadblock or this wall, they're not keeping their customer in mind. It's going to decrease their customer engagement. And so they're going to be less interested in actually using your product and then buying it if that is what sort of product you're building, or engaging with it. Their experience is going to be degraded, and they're not going to want to keep using it. And thus your business at the end of the day is going to start losing out.
Yeah, I think it's something that gets very underestimated, is that engagement now, especially with things like web chat and stuff like that, is that I've looked at competing products before, and I may have seen a product that was slightly superior, but because the other product had a web chat and I could go and I could speak to somebody technical about implementation, I could talk to them about how I was going to use their product, that I went with the maybe slightly inferior product, because I knew there was somebody there that if there was an issue or a problem, I could talk to somebody and I could get that assistance. Whereas if you go to a website and it's just a plain website with just reams and reams of documentation, I'm probably going to be less inclined to go with that option, because I want a quick turnaround. I want to be able to just use your product. I don't want to have to spend several weeks poring over documentation and struggling with issues and things that I get, because in those sort of situations it would be, you'd send an email to support and they say, well, we will get back to you in 3 to 4 weeks. And you think, well, I can't wait that sort of time. I need this resolving now. And that customer engagement is so important as a customer, deciding whether I use your product or not.
Yeah, and it's one of the. It reminds me very much of in the realm of like crash reporting solutions. If you have an error or an issue comes up to a given customer, the likelihood that they're actually going to report it by going onto your website and then providing a feedback form is just very, very low. I know from personal experience, I've gone to many websites and had a given experience, or even chilling out and playing a game or whatever, something will go wrong. I just want to get back to what I was doing previously. I don't want to log into a website and then have to log this. And the same goes for the particular needs. If the customer is trying to get something done and then they run up into a roadblock or an issue that is slightly tangential to what they're doing or is preventing them, then I don't want to have to then spend another 10 minutes on support trying to reply and let them know of the given feedback. I just kind of want to get my task done now. And so if you're not keeping your customer in mind, then it can just, again, lead to that degraded experience for them, because only so many customers will actually get involved actively of their own accord and share their information. Yeah.
It's some poignant points on that as well. You need to, if you're going to include that sort of crash reporting to ability for the customer, you need to make it easy. You don't want to have them go and sign up for an Atlassian account and then log into Jira and then have them navigate to a Scrum board and raise a ticket and stuff like that. And I have seen that as well before. You've got to make these things as simple as possible.
It should be automated.
Yeah. Well, if we put enough blockers and enough barriers in the way, the customers won't report any issues, which means our software is great, right?
I don't think it quite works that way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to rethink that thought process.
Oof.
What one of the other I think elephants in the room that I don't think that people ignore it on purpose, but it's something you are shielded from as a junior developer and probably as a mid-level developer as well, which was business outcomes. That the senior developers tend to get very involved with that, understanding things like costs and repercussions and all that sort of stuff. If you've got any points you want to give to the listener on what a business outcome is.
Yeah, so to clarify a business outcome, typically they're metrics which are focused on the business's performance, the business's needs or requirements around it. The way I typically think of business outcomes, most times, and in my experience, they can be related to money or cash. Most businesses, at least that I've worked in, are typically in business to make money and make a profit because everyone needs money to survive, need to pay the bills and have food. And so a lot of business outcomes just relate back to that, but they're more metric focused. So these would be things around customer retention rate, acquisition, engagement, profitability, were there additional sales, reduced costs, and relating it back to your developer. Whatever you're building, there is a reason why you're building it, and there's a proposed value. People typically don't go out, or a business doesn't go out one day and decide we're going to start advertising our product on the Heroku marketplace for fun. Typically, there's a strategy involved behind that because there is the additional sales and profitability that can come through that marketing channel. And if you don't understand that business outcome or reason why you're building something, and you can't start to question, is this the right path, or is what I am building applicable to this business outcome, then you are just going to be building exactly what's on the ticket and what is desired, and that isn't going to help you progress. And the other thing with these business outcomes, when you start thinking them as well about them in your regular day-to-day workflow, is when you come to the conclusion or the completion of a project, you can then start adding it to your CV, which looks very good.
Yeah, and some of those business outcomes can be massively impactful as well, and it's something that it's impactful for the business, mainly in positive ways if you get the software right and you get out there, but it can have other effects that you need to be, I think, as a developer, very, very aware of, and to some degree could become okay with, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. You talked about efficiencies and saving money and things like that. And something that I've been in a position to do previously is that I've brought in new software, I've written new systems, and it's changed people's jobs. So there was no longer a requirement for a particular role or particular roles, and those people were either moved to different parts of the business, or a worse outcome is that they're now surplus to requirement for the business. And at the end of the day, this is business things for business reasons. And that's something, it's a very uncomfortable situation to be in, but your system could be replacing somebody's job. If these people work for a good company that appreciates these people, they will move them to other roles. But it is something to be very aware of, that you could be replacing people in their day-to-day jobs. But then on the flip side of that, a very similar situation, but with a much better outcome, is that recently for a client, they were receiving 95% of the phone calls they were receiving were for a particular request. I then built a self-service system for that need, and the calls into that call center dropped by 95% because all the customers could access the information that they needed via that portal. And that didn't mean that the call center was reduced in number of members of staff, but it meant that those staff members could actually focus on the real work, the hard, taxing piece of their job, where they've got real customer issues, not just some really basic, frivolous sort of tasks that they were doing before. So it made their jobs actually more interesting and slightly easier because they didn't have to do that repetitive, boring task all the time.
Yeah, and it sounds like you saved them a lot of time and a lot of pain around that, not having to do the boring, frivolous tasks. But I think all of the points that you've made does come under this awareness of, if you do have this thought of you do need to maybe consider the ethics behind what it is that you're building. And if you're not quite comfortable with that, the solution you're building, or that could potentially replace people's jobs or make their lives even better, then you probably need to start reevaluating what you're currently working on.
Yeah. It's one of those things you either get on board or you get off, unfortunately. As you say, we are here to make money, to put food on our tables and roofs over our heads, and it's unfortunately the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and I don't want to clarify, this is a very generalized statement, of course. There are you have the public sector who are looking to hopefully improve the betterment of the given country or state or whatever you're in. But I'm going to make the assumption that most people and most developers typically work for a business who is working for shareholders.
Yep, and making a profit is the bottom line. And listeners, hold on to your seats. The business really doesn't care if your code looks pretty and it's elegant and it's written in the best way. One of the phrases I keep using regularly, it's slowly becoming one of my catchphrases, is good enough is good enough. And at the end of the day, if it does the job and it gets the business outcome, that's all you need to do. Spending 3 weeks on an if statement so that it looks pretty isn't necessarily the best use of your time. So something to evaluate there.
Yeah, and there are different things you need to consider when you're actually coming out a piece of work, as well as whatever we write has an expiry date on it. At some point in time, it's not going to be relevant and it's not going to be needed anymore. For example, we've got a couple projects going on where we're writing a new piece to currently have compatibility sorted, but it's largely going to be redundant. All of it's going to be redundant the moment another piece of work is completed. And so the gold plating around it isn't important.
Yeah.
Because the moment this other project's completed, it's going to be completely defunct. And so one little tidbit to share is that I've always starting to realized at different points in my career is the code you write isn't going to be around forever. There is an expiry, and you need to consider that longevity of it and how it relates back to those business outcome that you have and need, various factors that come into play.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a level of maturity that you need to get to with your coding. Yes, along the lines of good enough is good enough. Do what the job needs because it could expire. But also with that expiry comes the fact that your little baby that you've been working on for the past 6 months is going to die at some point. And you've got to not be precious about or too precious about the work that you're doing, because it could become surplus to requirement. It could be just the fact that someone else has got a better way of doing it, and not getting upset and annoyed because your bit of kit isn't working. Your baby's not as beautiful as you thought it was. It's something that you need to deal with. I have worked with seniors that have not learned that lesson just yet, and it's something that they need to do.
Yeah, I've had a similar example, or right recently, really, where in the business you're operating in, a feature doesn't get used or it's not utilized, and so you just need to remove it because it's not actually helping or benefiting anyone, and in fact can degrade the performance of the software because of additional maintenance and the fact it's running. And you just got to accept that wasn't a success. The code behind it can be great, but at the end of the day, it just needs to be removed and stripped out, and be comfortable with that, and accept that you've learned skills relevant during that project. But it's time to put it to rest.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really hard to accept. That is that you've made this absolutely amazing piece of software. You've added this great feature to a package, and it is astounding at what it does. The information it provides you is awesome, but nobody uses it. And if nobody uses it, then unfortunately, it's of no use to anybody. So it needs to go away, because the longer it stays there unused, it just becomes maintenance and technical debt that, as you say, you've got to maintain. And unfortunately, the best answer to it is delete it. And as long as you're using version control, you could always bring it back later on. It's not gone forever.
Oh yeah, there have been some funny stories where you see people commenting things and they're more generally new people. Oh, I might need it later. And then you're like, but you can just revive it. It's fine.
Yeah. The amount of times I've had that conversation rather recently is, stop commenting the code. If you don't need it, delete it, because it's in version control. We'll pull it back later. I'll show you how to do that if you don't know. Because if you leave that code in there commented out, at the moment you know why it's commented out. In 2 months, you won't know why it's commented out. In 3 months, you're probably not sure what it does. In 6 months, you've got no clue what it does. And in 12 months' time, you might not be at that company, and someone else is looking at that code going, was that commented out accidentally? I don't know. I'm not going to uncomment it, but I'm not going to delete it just in case. And then it stays there forever. So it's definitely something to be aware of.
And that can even lead to regressions. We've had a similar incident just today as recording, actually, where a feature was accidentally included a while ago, though, and it was because it was just commented out in the code. And then upon doing another feature, it was, why is this commented out? I'm going to comment it back in. And so all of a sudden it becomes a new feature that nobody intended.
You've had a soft launch on a feature that people have actually now been using and think is great, but it's like that wasn't supposed to be out yet.
Whoops, that doesn't work.
All those viral posts then. 10 features of Raygun that you didn't knew exist.
It's not quite that bad. It was an easy fix. It was a honest mistake.
That's good.
It just happens when you have trying to maintain code written in many years by many different people.
I think also while we're talking about level of maturity and progressing it as a developer, I think some points there that I think you touched on a little bit earlier, thinking outside of the box. And not being spoon fed. So, like when you've got a ticket that says do X, Y, and Z, to think a little bit more about what's being asked of you in those tickets.
Yeah, I think what's really important when you're thinking outside the box as well is to really understand the context and the situation behind it. As well, what is the value that you're trying to bring or you're trying to provide? Because a lot of the time, the solution that you have in the ticket might not be the actual best solution for a given scenario. Maybe the customer is just having a problem where they don't understand how a feature works. And so having that educational piece or that little help tip or label would be more applicable and would also be a lot quicker to implement rather than looking to redesign the feature entirely. So when it comes to picking up some of these tickets, start to actually think outside the box when it comes to the actual given solution and the scenarios that are applicable.
I think it's definitely a skill that you should be picking up. I think even moving from junior to a mid-level developer, it's something you need to be doing. Looking at that ticket, is this what we actually need? Go back to your BAs, go back to your product owners, go back to your customers and say, well, is this what you intended this feature to do? Is this exactly what you want? Because you haven't thought about this, you haven't thought about this impact, and we could build this and it would do exactly what you want, but this is an easier way to achieve that same thing. And I've definitely been in situations where I've looked at a new feature and it technically does what it says in the ticket, but it's not usable. There's the UX of it is terrible. And not everybody has the skills and abilities to provide good UX on their own. And if you are in that position, ask somebody that does. Make sure that you're providing the best user experience that you can for a product, because there's no point in picking up a ticket and doing the work on it, building this big new feature, but there's no way to get to it. It's not linked in the main section for the user's control panel or anywhere else. And when asked, your answer should never be, well, they just type this in the URL. That may or may not be a real situation I've had. That's not the solution.
Yeah. Just be curious, ask questions, try to understand the purpose behind a feature. I think some of the best developers I've worked with always try and understand why is it we're doing something, or what is the value involved in this, or have you thought about these situations? Just get curious and start having those conversations and asking, because it shows that you are trying to be engaged. You are trying to understand the full context of the situation and the scenarios at play to give that best experience.
Yeah, pushing back on a ticket or a task that you've been given is not a bad thing. It can be seen by people that don't understand the premise of why you're doing it. It can be seen as those people that you're being difficult. And I've definitely been in that situation where I've had to explain, I'm not being difficult. I'm just trying to make sure that what we're building or what we're trying to achieve is actually what we need. And having the confidence to come full circle, to actually question what you've been asked to do, I think is a very underrated skill. And it does upset me a little bit when I sit in teams and nobody asks questions. Nobody says, why are we doing that? Do you not understand the implications of what we're doing? That's not going to work. They just go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we'll go and do that. And then when you approach them at the end of the sprint, they go, why wasn't it done? Well, it didn't work with this process, and I'm waiting on somebody to come back to me about this and that. And you're like, really? Why was this not raised before?
Yeah, and it becomes the most disappointing thing when you are waiting for someone who has just blindly implemented a feature which isn't applicable or doesn't make sense in a given context, and you ask them, well, why did you implement this or look to implement this? And they're like, well, it was just, I had this conversation or it was ticketed.
Yep.
But it doesn't make sense. Like, it leaves a lot of room for misinterpretation.
Yeah, and you will have people up in the team somewhere, some of these product owners that will slip stuff in because it's what they want in a system and not necessarily what the business wants. So it's not a business outcome. It's not something for the customers. It's just something that they want. And I've definitely seen that before. So questioning those tickets is always is beneficial. We're almost out of time, so we'd just like to wrap things up with. Have you got any tips or links to any blog posts or anything like that would maybe help the listeners to maybe pick up these skills?
Yeah, so one good book I finished reading just recently, actually, that I think is really applicable is called The Pragmatic Programmer. Some of the content's a little outdated. I think it's been written, content being maybe the technology used, but I think a lot of the tips involved is actually really applicable to developers, especially those who are newer, starting on their journey.
Yeah, it's a good book, and it's one of those books that is up on the shelf of, if you want to be a developer, you need to have read this book. So I'll link up to that book in the show notes.
100%. Took photos of all of the tips to remind myself and come back to later. So would highly recommend that to everyone else.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, it just leaves me to say thank you for spending some time today talking to us. I think it's been a really interesting conversation, and I hope the listeners have got something from it as well.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you, James.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone out there for listening to The Cynical Developer. I'm James Stoddart, and you've been listening to Benjamin Harding talking about more than just coding. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help The Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.